Moana Mackey.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister of Housing. Did Housing New Zealand take into account the statements made by Rt Hon John Key when in opposition not to wholesale reorganise or restructure the public sector or reduce the number of frontline staff when Housing New Zealand developed their plans for restructuring?
The Honourable Phil Heatley.
Well, Mr Speaker, I only require them to take into account my annual letter of expectations as Minister of Housing, which I trust reflects John Key's view as Prime Minister.
Moana Mackey.
Is he seriously saying that his changes to Housing New Zealand, which they have confirmed, which will result in frontline redundancies, closure and downgrading of Housing New Zealand neighbourhood units, tenancy managers being made to work out of their cars, and the instruction to staff that they must no longer concern themselves with vulnerable tenants' quote wider social needs is not a major restructuring and will not result in the reduction of frontline Housing New Zealand staff?
The Honourable Phil Heatley.
Well, Mr Speaker, the corporation's yet to make a decision, but if less staff are able to deliver more and better frontline services because they no longer paper shuffle but are actually out in their cars visiting tenants, then I support Housing New Zealand.
Moana Mackey.
If making tenancy managers work out of their cars because it's such an effective way of getting more out of them and serving their community, will he be advising his colleague Whangarei MP Phil Heatley to close his electorate office and have his staff work out of their cars so that they can better serve their communities?
The Honourable Phil Heatley.
Speaker, I think part of the reason for the success of National MPs is they don't hide in their offices. They're out and about in their cars visiting their constituents.
Moana Mackey.
Supplementary to the Minister, what is he doing about the rock-bottom morale amongst Housing New Zealand staff, given the lack of consultation, the fact they've already been told to stop attending to the social needs of tenants before any other protocols are put in place, and the speed of these changes, such as the case of one young mum who was shocked to find out that she's been fired by Housing New Zealand while she's on maternity leave?
The Honourable Phil Heatley.
Mr Speaker, I am not aware of the member's various allegations.
Moana Mackey.
Will he give an assurance to community housing organisations who have already seen a marked increase in their workload thanks to the changes he's implemented, that they will be properly resourced to cope with the further additional workload that will fall on them? And will he at least have the decency to consult with the community housing sector, given he keeps saying that they're the solution and yet they've not been consulted and they have absolutely no idea what's going on?
The Honourable Phil Heatley.
Mr Speaker, the non-governmental community housing organisations I've spoken to have said to me that Housing New Zealand tenancy managers are not district nurses, they're not parole officers, they're not policemen, they're not mental health experts, and they would prefer to do that work. And could Housing New Zealand staff just pass those concerns on to them? And we're saying yes, Housing New Zealand staff will pass those concerns on to those specialist providers.
Supplementary question, Moana Mackey.
Given that social housing in New Zealand is still recovering from the actions of the last national government, which hocked off 13,000 state houses, carried out no modernisation whatsoever, why isn't he carrying on from the work of the last Labour government, which spent 9 years trying to repair the damage, instead of firing frontline staff, reducing the housing stock, now taking the social out of social housing, or is he simply trying to finish the job?
The Honourable Phil Heatley.
Mr Speaker, the previous government, and it's well known, left the state housing stock in a serious state of disrepair, old, cold and mouldy houses, and where the rats and mice didn't destroy Labour's state houses, the gangs did, and they let them get away with that too.
Order. Supplementary question. Order. Supplementary question. The Honourable Leanne Dalzell.
My question to the Minister is, has he read any of the evaluations of the community renewal project in Aranui, which has made a substantial difference both in terms of the housing stock but also providing the community itself with the foundation that it needs for recovery after the massive earthquake, and a strengthened organisation in partnership with Housing New Zealand, the City Council and with central government?
The Honourable Phil Heatley.
Yes.
Question number 9, Nikki Kay.